Everything was glitter and gold in Alexander Laird's life until he crossed the line between ambition and temptation. One evening, a single mocking remark from his secret mistress crashed down upon his pregnant wife, Catherine, bruising her spirit. By the next morning, fortune's wheel had turned. Alexander lost a whopping $20 million in one brutal stroke. How did a blossoming empire crumble so swiftly? And why did this betrayal strike at the heart of a once happy marriage? This story unravels the dark secrets hidden behind lavish parties, power plays, and desperate hearts. Buckle up for a real-life drama that will keep you breathless until the final twist. Alexander Laird was a man who seemed to have everything. At 37, he was the founder and CEO of Laird Innovations, a technology conglomerate making headlines with groundbreaking eco-friendly applications. Headquartered in San Francisco, the company was rumored to be one of the fastest growing in the tech sector. Investors fawned over him. He was regularly invited to speak at prestigious events where people like Sir Richard Branson and Elon Musk might also appear, adding to his reputation as a visionary. On top of this thriving professional life, Alexander was married to the graceful Catherine Laird. Catherine came from a well-established family in Connecticut, the sort that balanced old money heritage with a desire to do genuine good in the world. She had studied art history, but found her true calling in interior design. Although she loved curating stunning showrooms, Catherine soon focused on philanthropic efforts, especially involving children's welfare and education. She was known to volunteer long hours at community centers, teach art classes to underprivileged kids, and use her taste and connections to organize charity galas. This philanthropic side endeared Catherine to many. A tall, willowy brunette with expressive hazel eyes, she exuded warmth without self-righteousness. People adored her for her sincerity, and many credited her as the force behind Alexander's more empathetic business moves, like instituting robust maternity leave policies at Laird Innovations and sponsoring educational programs for the employees' children. Despite a decade of marriage, Alexander and Catherine's union seemed picture-perfect on the outside. Close friends described them as relationship goals. Their synergy was impeccable. She tempered his brash ambitions while he ignited her quiet creativity. Yet beneath this harmonious veneer were undercurrents of tension. Alexander's obsession with success nudged him toward corners of the business world where ethics blurred, and Catherine's quiet heartbreak was that she felt him drifting away. When Catherine announced she was pregnant, the entire Laird Innovations office celebrated. She was glowing. The presence of a child in their life seemed like the ultimate blessing. The couple appeared more radiant than ever, at least publicly. But Catherine sensed that Alexander's once ardent devotion had shifted. He seemed absent during her first trimester's milestones, missing doctor's appointments in favor of critical investor meetings. Though Catherine tried to excuse him, after all, steering a major corporation demanded sacrifices, she couldn't help but feel his lack of presence. No one suspected that Alexander had already begun a secretive entanglement. If asked, he would have insisted he was simply working late. But Catherine knew something was off. She felt it in every cancelled dinner date, every conversation he cut short, and the new flicker in his eyes whenever he checked his phone. Those signs, at first subtle, grew too glaring to ignore. The seeds of betrayal were sown, and they would soon sprout into a monstrous reality. The illusions of a perfect life would shatter with devastating consequences. And ironically, it would take just a simple, mocking remark from the very woman who had stolen Catherine's husband to set fate's ruthless dominoes in motion. Months before Catherine's pregnancy announcement, Alexander had begun meeting with a cunning socialite named Vanessa Price. Vanessa was stunning by all standards: short, platinum blonde hair, slim figure, bright, piercing blue eyes. She possessed a certain energy that made her stand out in high society gatherings. No one exactly knew her origins. Rumor had it she was from a modest background in Ohio, but reinvented herself upon hitting her late 20s. To some, Vanessa's life was a testament to ambition and hustle. She appeared to network her way up in the most exclusive circles, from fancy Napa Valley wineries to private Monaco events. To others, she was a manipulative opportunist who thrived on turning powerful men into her personal stepping stones. Alexander first crossed paths with Vanessa at an exclusive fundraiser co-hosted by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and Laird Innovations. Catherine ironically had orchestrated the event, but fell ill that evening, leaving Alexander to preside alone. Vanessa had approached him with a confident smile, congratulating him on his philanthropic initiatives. She praised his visionary approach in an almost flirtatious tone. Intrigued and flattered, Alexander found himself lingering in conversation well past the fundraiser's official end. Over the following weeks, chance encounters at various black tie gatherings continued. Vanessa would appear at events with the perfect elevator pitch for whichever philanthropic cause might interest Alexander. Her charm seemed effortless, her intelligence a perfect match for Alexander's own aspirations. Where Catherine's presence reminded Alexander of his moral compass and responsibilities, Vanessa fanned his ego and stoked hidden desires. In truth, Alexander found it both exciting and troubling. He loved Catherine, at least he told himself so. But he was also mesmerized by Vanessa's boldness. She was direct about her desire for him, about wanting to be with a man who matched her drive. She made him feel unstoppable, as though normal rules didn't apply. Their relationship escalated one night after a glitzy tech conference in Las Vegas. They shared a cocktail in Vanessa's penthouse suite, which overlooked the neon skyline. A dangerous line was crossed. Alexander tried convincing himself it was a one-time mistake, but repeated rendezvous ensued. The secrecy, the rush of risking discovery, and Vanessa's unwavering admiration fueled his indiscretions. While Catherine battled morning sickness and quietly decorated the nursery for their unborn child, Alexander was sneaking off to see Vanessa in lavish hotel rooms and exclusive clubs. He justified it all under the guise of business expansions, telling Catherine that new partnerships were crucial for Laird Innovations. If he sensed any guilt, he buried it under his relentless pursuit of success and the adrenaline rush Vanessa brought. Vanessa, in turn, was playing her own game. She adored the lavish gifts, the expensive dinners, and the high society connections that came with being seen discreetly, of course, on Alexander's arm. She knew Catherine was pregnant, but that only seemed to heighten Vanessa's thrill. Each time she looked at Alexander's wedding ring, she was reminded that she held power over a man who otherwise appeared untouchable. But secrets rarely remain hidden forever. The deeper Alexander fell under Vanessa's spell, the more precarious his personal and professional worlds became. It was only a matter of time before everything collided in an explosive confrontation that would ripple across his fortunes, relationships, and future. Back in San Francisco, Catherine was increasingly concerned. Alexander's persistent absences gnawed at her. He missed the baby's first ultrasound appointment. He failed to show up for the small, intimate dinner Catherine organized for her mother's birthday. Whenever Catherine tried to reach out to him, he claimed to be stuck in late-night negotiations or forging partnerships that would bring unprecedented growth to Laird Innovations. In truth, it wasn't all lies. Alexander was also under immense corporate pressure. Laird Innovations had gone public just 6 months ago, and large institutional investors were hungry for rapid returns. His leadership team insisted on an aggressive expansion plan, which involved everything from new software products to venturing into the electric vehicle market. Though the stock price soared, Alexander was terrified of any sign of weakness that could trigger panic among shareholders. Frustrated with her husband's distance, Catherine found solace in her philanthropic projects. She doubled her hours with the local community center, continuing to teach art to children. She also spent afternoons designing the nursery. She chose soothing pastel tones, reading up on child psychology to ensure the decor was both stimulating and comforting for their future son or daughter. She wanted the baby's room to be a haven of love and creativity. Amid these preparations, Catherine confided in a few close friends like Linda Robertson, an old college friend who worked in PR for a major fashion label in New York. Linda discreetly confirmed the swirling rumors around Alexander. In the cutthroat world of business and tabloids, it was almost impossible to hide an affair for long, especially when expensive hotels and exclusive clubs were involved. Linda told Catherine that she had overheard second-hand whispers about Alexander being often seen with a striking blonde. Desperate for clarity, Catherine approached one of Alexander's most trusted colleagues, Timothy "Tim" Brooks, a longtime friend who served as the CFO of Laird Innovations. Tim had been supportive of Catherine's philanthropic interests, often attending her charity galas with his own family. When Catherine questioned him about Alexander's unusual behavior, Tim hesitated. He knew the truth. He had even tried to dissuade Alexander from meeting Vanessa, so frequently fearing both personal and professional repercussions. But Tim felt cornered, torn between loyalty to the company's CEO and genuine concern for Catherine. So he offered a vague reassurance, something along the lines of, "Alexander has a lot on his plate right now, but I know he loves you." That evening, Catherine tried one last time to have a heartfelt conversation with her husband. She waited until he returned from work well past midnight and confronted him in the soft glow of a single table lamp in the living room. Catherine, heart pounding, told him about the rumors about her fears and her loneliness. Alexander put on his best performance of feigned indignation, dismissing the rumors as malicious gossip from jealous rivals. He never once mentioned Vanessa by name, but that night he reassured Catherine that nothing mattered to him more than their family. Catherine wanted to believe him. She wanted so badly to cling to the dream of a joyful family with Alexander, especially now that a baby was on the way. Yet an unspoken tension lingered in the air. Little did they know, a brutal confrontation with the mistress herself loomed on the horizon, a moment that would topple Catherine's illusions and turn Alexander's world upside down. The invitation had arrived weeks ago, embossed on cream card stock and sealed in gold foil, an exclusive cocktail reception hosted by venture capitalist Michael Hastings, one of Alexander's closest business partners. The event, set in his lavish Pacific Heights mansion, was meant to celebrate a new round of funding for Laird Innovations. Catherine hadn't been sure she would attend. Lately, she'd felt like an ornament at these events, admired but ignored, photographed but unseen. Still, she knew how important public appearances were for Alexander's image. So despite her fatigue and the quiet ache in her chest, she went. The Pacific Heights mansion glowed like something out of a dream. Chandeliers dripping crystals, live string music humming from a secluded corner, and uniformed staff circulating with trays of hors d'oeuvres and champagne. Catherine chose a flowing navy blue gown that accentuated her modest baby bump. Her hair was pulled back in a classic chignon, and though her face was pale, she carried herself with grace. Alexander, ever the charmer, looked effortlessly handsome in a tailored tuxedo. He greeted her with a kiss on the cheek before quickly being whisked away by Michael Hastings and a few board members. Catherine was left alone, surrounded by murmurs, laughter, and faces she barely knew. She was scanning the room for a familiar friend when her eyes landed on her. Vanessa Price. The name had echoed through Catherine's thoughts for weeks, whispered in gossipy tones by acquaintances and half confirmed by a trusted friend. But now the mystery had a face, and it was breathtaking. Vanessa stood near the bar holding court like a queen. She wore a shimmering silver dress that clung to her figure and sparkled under the lights. Her platinum blonde hair was sculpted to perfection, and her confident posture made her impossible to ignore. But what struck Catherine most wasn't Vanessa's beauty. It was the way she stared directly at her, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. A flicker of dread passed through Catherine's chest. She tried to steady herself, placing a hand over her stomach. Her baby kicked gently, as if sensing her unease. Then, as if summoned by some twisted force of fate, Vanessa broke from her circle and walked across the room. "Catherine Laird," she said with a radiant smile, extending a manicured hand. Catherine hesitated for a moment before accepting the handshake. Vanessa's grip was firm, her skin cool. "Yes," Catherine replied politely. "And you are?" "Vanessa Price. I've heard so much about you," she said, her voice velvet smooth. "It's a pleasure to finally meet Alexander's wife." The words were sharp, like sugar-glazed daggers. Vanessa's gaze dropped for a moment to Catherine's baby bump. "Pregnancy really becomes you. You're glowing." Catherine forced a small smile. "Thank you." Vanessa's eyes lingered, then flicked back up. "You know, Alexander and I have been collaborating on some philanthropic ventures lately. He has such a visionary mind, it's intoxicating, really." Catherine's stomach twisted. She struggled to keep her voice steady. "Yes, he's very passionate about his work." Vanessa leaned in slightly, her tone lowering into something more personal, more venomous. "I can see why he loves you. You have such a gentle soul." The word gentle was delivered like a sneer. Catherine's breath caught. Her hand trembled slightly around her glass. "Excuse me," she said, her voice tight. "Oh, I mean it sincerely," Vanessa said, batting her lashes. "It must be exhausting being pregnant while he's so busy building empires. I can't imagine how difficult it is to keep up." Catherine was stunned. She didn't respond. She couldn't. "And if you ever need someone to talk to," Vanessa added sweetly, her eyes gleaming, "I'm here. I know how demanding Alexander can be. Intimately." The final word was a knife to the chest. There it was, confirmation, taunting, deliberate. Catherine's legs felt unsteady. Her throat tightened. She wanted to scream, to cry, to slap the smug expression off Vanessa's face. But instead she stood still, spine straight, her heart thudding against her ribs. Vanessa tilted her head slightly, smiling once more, and walked away back into the crowd, into the arms of another admirer, leaving Catherine standing alone in a sea of glitter and cruelty. The room blurred. The music faded. Catherine could no longer breathe properly. She excused herself from a passing guest, barely remembering her manners. Her heels clicked too loudly on the marble as she made her way to the exit. Outside, the cold air hit her like a slap. She inhaled sharply, pressing a hand over her heart. Her eyes stung with tears that she had fought hard to hold back. She didn't wait for Alexander. She didn't even send a goodbye. She texted him a single message: "I'm leaving. I don't feel well." Inside, Alexander never noticed her disappearance until it was far too late. He was too wrapped up in deals, in strategy, in himself. He'd had no idea what had just happened. No idea that the life he thought he was managing with such finesse had just cracked wide open. As Catherine rode home alone in the back of a town car, her mind spiraled. All the signs she had ignored, all the lies she had forgiven, all the nights she had cried silently. Vanessa's words had ripped the bandage off. The wound underneath was gaping, and she knew. She knew the truth now. There was no more denying it, no more rationalizing. Alexander had betrayed her, and the world knew it. But worse, she knew it. And that changed everything. The front door closed behind her with a gentle click, but the silence that followed was deafening. Catherine slipped off her heels and walked through the quiet house like a ghost. The dim hallway lights cast long shadows on the walls, and every framed photo, her and Alexander on their honeymoon at charity galas in Tuscany, now looked like mocking relics of a life that had never truly existed. The baby kicked again, and she paused, resting her hand on her belly. "It's just us now," she whispered. She ascended the stairs, slowly exhausted in every sense of the word. The master bedroom was cool and tidy. The curtains fluttered in the evening breeze. On one side of the room sat the bassinet she had lovingly assembled just days ago. A folded baby blanket rested inside, pale yellow, with tiny embroidered stars. Catherine walked to the edge of the bed and sat down, staring at it, barely blinking. She felt hollow. Not angry yet. Not quite sad. Just emptied. When she heard Alexander's car in the driveway a couple of hours later, her heart lurched. She wiped her face and steeled herself. She would not crumble again in front of him. Not tonight. The door opened and closed. She heard his hurried footsteps. "Catherine," he called. "I'm upstairs," she replied flatly. He entered the room looking rumpled, anxious. His eyes immediately took in her posture, rigid arms crossed over her belly, face unreadable. "I got your message. I didn't know you left." "I was in the middle of Save It," she interrupted. He took a step forward. "Are you okay?" "No," she said, voice cracking. "No, I'm not okay." "Was it the baby? Did something happen?" She looked up, her eyes brimming with restrained fury. "Oh, something happened. Vanessa Price happened." Alexander froze. "She approached me," Catherine said, standing up slowly. "Introduced herself like we were girlfriends meeting over brunch, complimented my pregnancy glow, told me she works with you on philanthropy, of all things. And then she mocked me. Told me she understood how exhausting it must be for me while you're out building empires. She said she's intimately familiar with your demands." Alexander opened his mouth, but no words came out. His face went pale. I knew she continued. "I've known something was wrong for months, but I kept making excuses for you. I told myself you were under pressure. I believed your lies. I believed you still loved me." "I do love you," Alexander said hoarsely, stepping closer. Then why she cried. "Why would you humiliate me like this? Why would you cheat on me while I'm carrying your child?" Tears spilled down her cheeks as Alexander dropped to his knees in front of her. "I made a mistake," he whispered. "A terrible, selfish mistake. I never meant to hurt you. It started small. I thought it was harmless, but then it spiraled, and Catherine laughed bitterly through her tears. Harmless. You thought sneaking around with some fame-hungry socialite while I was vomiting every morning and putting together a nursery was harmless. I swear I didn't think it would go this far." "No, of course you didn't," she snapped. "Because you were thinking with your ego, not your heart." He looked up at her, his eyes red. "Please, let me make it right." Catherine stepped back. "I don't know if that's even possible." He stood slowly, as if afraid to scare her off. "I'll do anything. I'll cut her off. I'll come clean to the board. I'll resign from every deal if that's what it takes. I just want us back. I want our family." She shook her head. "You should have thought of that before sleeping with a woman who gets her kicks by humiliating your wife." Silence stretched between them. He reached for her hand, but she pulled it away. "I need space," she said quietly. "I need time to figure out what's left of me after this." "Please, Catherine." "Go." His face crumpled as he gathered his coat and turned to leave. As he reached the door, he hesitated. "For what it's worth, I never stopped loving you." But Catherine didn't respond. She sat down again on the bed and stared at the bassinet as the door closed behind him. Downstairs, Alexander ran into Tim Brooks in the foyer. The CFO had stopped by after the reception, having heard whispers that Catherine left early. Tim took one look at Alexander's face and knew. She found out Alexander nodded mutely. Tim sighed, jaw clenched. "I warned you. You didn't just blow up your marriage. You've put the entire company in jeopardy." "I know," Alexander whispered. "I know." Over the next few days, Catherine retreated completely from public view. She cancelled her appointments at the community centre, paused her charity projects, and deactivated her social media. Friends texted and called, but she responded to none. Only her mother and Linda Robertson were allowed in. They brought her warm food and blankets, rubbed her back when the sobs came at night, and reminded her gently, "You did nothing wrong." Meanwhile, Alexander isolated himself in the penthouse office above Laird Innovations' downtown headquarters. The walls that once felt like a fortress now seemed to close in on him. He couldn't sleep. He couldn't eat. He sent Catherine dozens of messages, texts, voicemails, emails, all unread. The sight of his wife slipping away haunted him more than the nosedive the company's stock was beginning to take. And that was no exaggeration. With Alexander distracted and Helix One rumors swirling, shareholders began panicking. Tim tried to keep things afloat, but it was clear that the company's public image, so tightly tied to Alexander, was beginning to fracture. And still Vanessa didn't return his calls. Not that he blamed her anymore. She had never promised him love. She had promised excitement, admiration, power. But when the tower began to fall, she had been the first to disappear. All Alexander had left was regret. But Catherine, she had something else, something stronger, resolve. In her quiet grief, Catherine began to see the world differently. She had loved Alexander with all her heart, but love wasn't enough. Not anymore. She had a baby to protect now. And maybe, just maybe, that child was her chance to build something beautiful out of the ruins. The morning after Catherine had asked him to leave, Alexander sat alone in his penthouse office, staring at the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking San Francisco. The skyline was veiled in mist, the usual sparkle of the city dulled by grey. It matched his mood perfectly. He hadn't slept. Catherine's words echoed in his mind like a drumbeat. "You should have thought of that before sleeping with a woman who gets her kicks by humiliating your wife." He ran a hand down his face and tried to shake it off. Work. That's what he needed. If he couldn't fix his marriage, maybe he could at least salvage his empire. But even as he tried to focus on his laptop screen, his inbox bombarded him with alerts. Investors were growing restless. Helix One was supposed to be the big win, the acquisition that would put Laird Innovations at the forefront of genetic tech. But cracks were beginning to show. Tim Brooks, his CFO and longest-standing ally, had already sounded the alarm days ago. There are too many red flags, Alex. Their trial results are murky, the patents are tangled in litigation, and there are whispers of regulatory scrutiny. We need to pause. But Alexander had waved him off, then consumed with other distractions. Vanessa, Catherine, the lies he was juggling, and the pride. Always the pride. Now those warnings came rushing back. Tim barged into the office mid-morning, holding a printed press release. "We've got a serious problem." Alexander looked up. His eyes were bloodshot. "What is it now?" Tim slapped the document on the desk. A medical journal just published a report accusing Helix One of data manipulation in their Phase 2 trials. The article's gaining traction. Bloggers, tech reporters, even some biotech watchdog accounts on Twitter are picking it up. Alexander skimmed the document. His heart sank. Words like falsified, inflated efficacy and clinical misrepresentation leapt off the page. Tim continued, voice low and urgent. "If this holds water, the entire deal's going to crash, and with it our share price. We bought in heavy. And if there's even a hint we knew something and withheld it, the SEC's going to come knocking." Alexander stood up, pacing. "We need to release a statement. Distance ourselves. Spin it. Say the deal was still under review." Tim exhaled sharply. "You pushed this deal through Alex. You called the press conference. You said we were in final stage acquisition. There are recordings, transcripts." Alexander rubbed his temples. "Damn it. Where were you yesterday when I called you about this?" Tim added, unable to hide the frustration in his voice. "We could have gotten ahead of it." Alexander didn't respond. He couldn't admit he'd been busy watching his marriage disintegrate in real time. By noon, Laird Innovations' stock began to slide. Slowly at first, then like a landslide. Reports confirmed that Helix One's internal documents had been leaked, suggesting that one of their most touted gene therapies had never cleared basic safety metrics. Social media exploded. Hashtags like #HelixHoax and #LairdCollapse started trending. Tim and the PR team drafted a response, but it was lukewarm at best. Investors wanted blood, or at least answers. Alexander tried to call into a board meeting from his office, but his voice lacked the confidence they had come to expect. His vision blurred with lack of sleep. His thoughts were fragmented by regret. The board grilled him. Why wasn't due diligence extended? Who approved this timeline? Why weren't these red flags disclosed earlier? He stuttered through answers, promising internal reviews, hinting that legal teams were mobilized. But they weren't reassured. By late afternoon, the damage was done. Helix One's stock had dropped 43%. Laird Innovations was down 19%, a loss of over $20 million in market capitalization. And the worst part, investors believed Laird Innovations had been reckless, maybe even complicit. Tim entered Alexander's office again around 5 this time, looking even more grim. "There's talk of an emergency session tomorrow," he said quietly. "The board wants to discuss leadership restructuring. I think they're considering asking you to step down at least publicly for damage control." Alexander stared at him. "You're serious?" Tim didn't blink. "This Helix One mess is radioactive, and your personal scandal is making it worse." Alexander turned toward the window again, clenching his fists at his side. Vanessa, he muttered under his breath. What, she's part of this too. The distraction, the timing, the way she exposed everything at the party. She knew what she was doing. Tim gave him a long, measured look. You made the decisions, Alex. You brought her into your life. You brought her into our lives. You pushed this deal. You ignored every warning I gave you, and now the entire company is paying for it. The words stung, not because they were cruel, but because they were true. That night, headlines plastered every news outlet, Laird Innovations under fire. After Helix One scandal. CEO, Alexander Laird, silent amid crisis. 20 million in value lost. Overnight, can Laird recover? Vanessa Price connection raises ethical concerns. Some of the articles included photos of Alexander with Vanessa at hotel lobbies, charity galas, private events. A blog post titled Tech Mogul's Mistress and the 20 mistake went viral. At home, Catherine scrolled through the news in silence. Her mother, seated next to her on the couch, shook her head. He's unraveling, she said softly. Catherine said nothing. Her expression was unreadable. Her hand rested on her belly, feeling the soft flutter of her baby's movement. Our child is coming into a storm, she thought, and I have to be the shelter. Meanwhile, Alexander sat alone in his penthouse nursing a whiskey. His phone buzzed with messages from the legal team, from reporters, from people he'd once called friends. But the one name he wanted to see never appeared. Catherine hadn't replied. And Vanessa gone. Silent. Her number now went straight to voicemail. He realized then the bitter irony. He had risked everything to chase a fleeting thrill. And now that thrill had vanished, leaving him surrounded by broken trust, collapsing shares, and a city skyline that no longer felt like his. He was no longer the visionary, no longer the golden boy. He was a headline, a punchline, and the $20 million. That was just the beginning of what he was about to lose. By the time Alexander woke the next morning, after only 2 hours of fitful sleep, an avalanche of messages inundated his phone. A wave of headlines battered him from every direction. Laird Innovations stock tumbles as Helix One fraud scandal grows. Alexander Laird's risky bet exposed. Is this the end of his meteoric rise? Mysterious mistress at the center of corporate turmoil. Sources say yes. That last headline jolted him awake like ice water. In the scramble to damage control the financial crisis, another scandal was brewing in the tabloids, piecing together clues about his affair with Vanessa Price. A gossip blog called Behind the Velvet Rope claimed to have photo evidence of Alexander leaving a hotel suite with Vanessa at odd hours. Social media was alight with speculation memes and cruel commentary about the tech mogul's pregnant wife, painting Catherine as the unsuspecting victim. Desperate, Alexander reached for his laptop, feverishly typing emails to Tim Brooks and the PR department. He demanded immediate statements refuting the affair rumors. Tim, exasperated with Alexander's denial, replied curtly that the personal scandal was now overshadowing the corporate meltdown. Investors who might have stuck with Laird Innovations amid the Helix One fiasco were shaken by the moral implications and the potential for an ongoing public relations nightmare. Alexander dashed to headquarters in a frenzy, but the atmosphere in the building had changed. Gone were the respectful nods and eager greetings. Employees whispered behind his back, giving him pitying or judgmental stares. When he passed by a group of staffers in the hallway, one woman quickly hushed her co-worker, who had been discussing a trending hashtag on Twitter, #Mistress mocked wife. The PR team insisted that a public apology to Catherine was necessary to quell the moral outrage swirling online. They also recommended postponing the Helix One acquisition indefinitely. Alexander felt cornered. How had he lost control of his entire life in just a matter of days? At midday, Tim Brooks knocked on Alexander's office door. He wore a somber expression. "The board wants your resignation as CEO," Tim said quietly. Alexander's heart dropped. "You're joking." He managed eyes wide with disbelief. Tim shook his head. "It's not final yet, but there's talk. They're concerned about your judgment, your image. We lost 20 million in market cap in less than 24 hours, and your personal scandal is fueling public distrust." Enraged and desperate, Alexander tried to call Catherine, but she sent every call to voicemail. He tried showing up at their home, but the housekeeper informed him Catherine was resting and preferred not to be disturbed, in a last desperate bid for damage control. Alexander placed a call to a well-connected crisis manager who had previously worked miracles for top Hollywood stars. But even the crisis manager sounded doubtful. "The public narrative is pretty damning," she said. "You need to show genuine remorse, step away from the spotlight and repair your marriage, or at least appear to." As the day wore on, the tabloids, mainstream media, and even more reputable business outlets continued to feed on the drama. Alexander Laird, once the unstoppable entrepreneur, was quickly becoming a cautionary tale of hubris. The unstoppable slide had begun. His fortune was bleeding away. But perhaps more devastating was the slow collapse of his carefully curated identity. While Alexander's world teetered on the brink, Vanessa Price seemed oddly unruffled, at least in public. At a fashionable Somar lounge, she was spotted sipping a martini with a few socialite friends, basking in the scandal's glow. Gossip columns captured her aloof stance. She neither confirmed nor denied her involvement with Alexander. Behind closed doors, however, Vanessa was quietly recalculating her next move. She had enjoyed the perks of being close to Alexander, the lavish gifts, the prestige, the sense of power. But with his reputation collapsing and his fortune in jeopardy, Vanessa saw her pipeline of luxury drying up fast. She also sensed something more precarious lurking. If the scandal deepened, there was a chance she could be subpoenaed in the event of an SEC investigation into Laird Innovations' insider knowledge about Helix One. A personal scandal was one thing, but potential legal battles spelled real danger. So Vanessa made a strategic decision. She put out feelers among her other wealthy acquaintances, hoping to distance herself from a sinking ship. She confided to a close friend, "I'll be damned if I let myself go down with Alexander. He's a big boy. He can handle his own mess." It was a ruthless move, but that was Vanessa's modus operandi. She had no qualms about self-preservation, even if it meant hanging Alexander out to dry. In her mind, he had served his purpose. Their affair had given her enough social currency to expand her circle of influential connections. The scandal might even enhance her bad girl mystique in certain circles, ironically making her more interesting to other well-heeled individuals seeking a thrill. Meanwhile, a tabloid article circulated, quoting a close associate of Vanessa, claiming that Vanessa had never truly cared about Alexander and had frequently joked about Catherine's pregnancy behind closed doors. She allegedly sneered at Catherine's boring lifestyle and questioned what kind of woman throws her life away for art classes with underprivileged kids when she could be traveling the world. This revelation only further enraged the public, solidifying Catherine's status as a sympathetic figure. Even some of Catherine's distant acquaintances rushed to her defense. Donors at her charity began making public statements about her impeccable character, intensifying the condemnation directed at Alexander and Vanessa. During one of his frantic attempts to salvage the situation, Alexander reached out to Vanessa, hoping she would help him refute some of the rumors, or at least keep silent. But her phone rang to voicemail. He left multiple messages, each more pleading than the last, but she did not respond. A terse text arrived that night. Vanessa, this is going too far. I can't be involved in your meltdown. Please don't contact me again. The emotional blow was devastating. He had sacrificed his marriage for a woman who now brushed him aside the moment his fortunes wavered. Even the illusions that had fueled his desire for her, her unwavering admiration, her flattering smiles vanished as quickly as the money from his bank accounts. In one stroke, Alexander lost the mistress he thought worshipped him, and with her the final shred of delusion that he could control the swirling chaos. While Alexander watched his empire crumble and Vanessa slipped into the shadows, Catherine found herself navigating a whirlwind of emotions: anger, hurt, betrayal, and a deep sense of loss. Yet in the midst of her heartbreak, she discovered an unexpected well of resolve. Firstly, Catherine leaned on her support network like never before. Her mother flew in from Connecticut and stayed at the house, offering quiet companionship and maternal guidance. Linda Robertson, the close friend who had sounded the alarm about the affair, rumors flew across the country to be at Catherine's side. Old friends from high school and college, some she hadn't spoken to in years, sent messages of love and solidarity. Secondly, Catherine immersed herself in her philanthropic work, channeling her pain into something constructive. She organized a new project at the community center, a series of art therapy workshops for children from troubled backgrounds. Sitting in the bright, paint-splattered studio, she facilitated group sessions where kids were encouraged to express complex emotions through creativity. In guiding them, Catherine found a measure of healing for herself. Ironically, the tabloids' portrayal of her as the wronged, pregnant wife brought public sympathy and attention to her causes. Donation offers poured in. Invitations to speak at charity conferences skyrocketed. Catherine was initially wary of the sudden limelight, but realized she could harness it to do genuine good. She appeared on a morning talk show, carefully steering the conversation away from the scandal to highlight the community center's needs and how art therapy could transform children's lives. Behind the scenes, Catherine wrestled with a crucial decision whether to end her marriage. She consulted with legal experts about the complexities of divorce, especially when a child was on the way. A part of her still held on to the slimmest hope that Alexander might change, that he might truly repent and commit to rebuilding their bond. Another part of her felt the betrayal was too deep. Adding another layer to her dilemmas, the negative publicity around Laird Innovations started to threaten Catherine's philanthropic projects. Some of the donors from the corporate sector worried about associating with Alexander Laird's name. Catherine made the bold choice to separate her philanthropic efforts from Laird Innovations, a move that disappointed some of the board members, but garnered support from the community at large. As she approached her 7th month of pregnancy, her baby bump had become more pronounced. She felt the child's kicks late at night and thought to herself, I have to be strong for both of us. She set up a comfortable nursery, continuing her earlier theme of calming pastels, but she quietly removed any references to Alexander. The carved wooden nameplate that once read Baby Laird above the crib was taken down and placed in a closet. All the while, Alexander made attempts to contact her, leaving flowers at the doorstep, sending letters filled with apologies. Catherine read them but could never quite bring herself to answer. The pain was still raw, her trust shattered. Yet beneath her sorrow, A steely strength was forming, one that refused to let betrayal define her future. Just as Catherine was finding her inner resilience, the corporate world exacted a final crushing blow on Alexander. An emergency board meeting convened at Laird Innovations' sleek conference room, an elegant space Alexander had personally designed to impress investors, complete with panoramic views of the San Francisco skyline. Yet that morning's grey, overcast skies mirrored the atmosphere inside the boardroom. Tim Brooks and the other board members sat in tense silence. They had a stack of documents before them, plunging stock reports, analyses of the Helix One scandal, and PR clippings about the affair. Alexander arrived with dark circles under his eyes and a palpable air of desperation. For years he had been the charismatic center of attention in these meetings, commanding the room with his forward-thinking ideas. Now every gaze that landed on him was tinged with resentment or pity. Given recent events, began the board's chairman, an elder statesman named Robert Linwood, we believe a change in leadership is necessary to restore investor confidence. Alexander tried to protest, citing the risk of a leadership vacuum, the intricacies of the Helix One negotiations, and the product launches scheduled for the next quarter. But the decision had already been made. In a matter of minutes, the board formally requested Alexander's resignation as CEO of Laird Innovations. They offered him a smaller advisory role, a token position, allowing him to save some face, but it came with strict conditions, barring him from any direct oversight. Seething inside, Alexander grudgingly accepted. He knew if he resisted, they would dismiss him outright, dissolving any last vestige of influence he might retain. After the meeting, Tim Brooks approached him in private, his expression conflicted. I tried to intervene, but the board was adamant, Tim said softly. Alexander nodded, tears threatening to break through. He felt alone, humiliated, and betrayed not just by Vanessa, but by the company he had built from scratch. Yet he also recognized it was his own hubris and poor choices that had brought him here. The news broke across financial and tech news outlets within the hour. Alexander Laird steps down. Amid scandal, Laird Innovations names interim CEO. Investors seemed relieved, and the stock price stabilized slightly, but nowhere near its previous highs. Returning to his penthouse felt like walking into an echo chamber of regret. The once breathtaking view of the city skyline now felt oppressive, reminding him of how he had reached the summit, only to self-destruct. He poured himself a stiff drink and stared out the floor-to-ceiling windows. He realized that his downfall wasn't merely about losing $20 million. It was about losing integrity, the respect of his peers, and perhaps the most precious relationships in his life. As night fell, he wept freely for the first time in years, acknowledging the full weight of his choices. In the silence, he understood one searing truth: redemption. If it was even possible, would require a reckoning far deeper than any business deal. It would require humility, atonement, and an unwavering commitment to become the man he should have been from the start. Following his forced resignation, Alexander entered a period of deep introspection. He removed himself from the glamorous social scene he once inhabited. He pulled out of high-profile fundraisers, lavish parties, and exclusive clubs. Instead, he spent days taking long walks through Golden Gate Park, reflecting on his life's choices, trying to piece together where he had gone wrong. This newly humble Alexander sought help. He approached a therapist, Dr. Simone Holloway, who specialized in relationship issues and crisis management. In their sessions, Alexander admitted to his insecurities, his hunger for external validation, and the thrill he felt from Vanessa's flattery. He confronted his guilt over betraying Catherine, recognizing how deeply he had wounded her during the most vulnerable period of her life. Dr. Holloway encouraged him to take actionable steps toward repairing the damage. Alexander realized that any chance at reconciliation would require showing genuine remorse rather than just uttering apologies. He began writing Catherine letters, heartfelt confessions of his failures, not excuses, but acknowledgments of the hurt he had caused. While Catherine still chose to maintain her distance, Alexander mailed the letters to her mother's house, hoping she would read them when she was ready. Simultaneously, Alexander tried to do right by his employees. Though he no longer had an official role in daily operations, he reached out to former colleagues and even wrote personal checks to several staff members who had suffered financially when the stock plummeted. He wasn't sure if the gesture would be appreciated or scorned, but he felt it was the least he could do to take responsibility for the fallout. In between therapy and attempts at making amends, Alexander volunteered at a local homeless shelter, a cause Catherine had championed in the past. He did it without announcing his name or seeking publicity. Kneeling on the cold floors to help clean up or ladling soup for lines of people in desperate circumstances, he felt a flicker of humility that had long been missing from his life. News of Alexander's transformation trickled out through word of mouth. Some called it a publicity stunt, while others were more charitable. Catherine's friends warned her to be skeptical, to remember all the ways he had hurt her. But a softening occurred in Catherine's heart, she saw, or at least hoped that maybe he was genuinely changing. As the weeks passed, the texts Catherine ignored turned into voicemails. She listened to, though she never responded. The flowers still arrived at her door, often accompanied by notes referencing the unborn child. He asked about baby names, health updates, and quietly promised that he would be there to support her, no matter what she decided about their marriage. Yet for all of Alexander's attempts at self-improvement, the question of trust remained. In the final weeks leading up to Catherine's due date, she faced a choice: push him out of her life permanently, or give him a chance to prove himself worthy of the family he had nearly destroyed. 2 weeks before Catherine's due date, she began experiencing complications that required an unplanned hospital visit. The baby was showing signs of distress, and her blood pressure spiked dangerously. In a panic, Catherine's mother dialed Alexander, who dropped everything: his therapy session, his volunteer work, and rushed to the hospital. For hours he paced the corridors, watching doctors and nurses hurry in and out of Catherine's room. He had never felt so powerless. Tim Brooks, learning of the situation, offered to help in any way, but Alexander politely declined. This was a family matter, something he needed to confront on his own. Finally, the doctor emerged with cautious optimism. Catherine and the baby were stable, but would require close monitoring. The doctor suggested Catherine remain hospitalized until it was safe to deliver. When Alexander was allowed into her room, he saw a frail, exhausted Catherine. She blinked at him, her eyes filled with a swirl of emotions: fear, anger, lingering love. In that quiet moment, Alexander spoke with sincerity. "I'm so sorry, Catherine. None of this matters if it means losing you or the baby. I don't expect you to forgive me, but let me be here for you." She gave a small nod, and tears slipped down her cheeks. In that moment, Catherine decided to allow him to stay, at least for now. She was too vulnerable to fight anymore, and she recognized that part of her still cared for the man she had once believed was her soulmate. In the days that followed, Alexander supported her through doctor visits, whispered reassurances, and midnight vigils by her bedside. He rubbed her back, held her hand, and strove to be the caring partner he had failed to be over the past year. Catherine's mother was initially wary, but saw glimpses of the kinder, more earnest Alexander she had once known. Amid this fragile peace, news arrived from Laird Innovations. The new interim CEO had stabilized the company's stock, but the Helix One deal was dead in the water. Lawsuits loomed on the horizon, and the company faced a class action from investors who felt misled about the biotech's viability. While Alexander's personal finances had recovered marginally, he remained tied up in the mess he had partly created, and he faced the prospect of ongoing legal battles. Yet in the grand scheme, the money mattered less to Alexander now. His primary focus was the baby's safe arrival and Catherine's health. After a tense week in the hospital, the doctors decided it was time to induce labor. It was a grueling process, but on a cloudy afternoon, Catherine delivered a baby girl they named Evelyn Rose Laird. Her piercing cry filled the room, bringing an emotional swell that no scandal or fortune could overshadow. Alexander held Evelyn for the first time, tears rolling down his cheeks. In that instant, he felt an overwhelming sense of devotion to this tiny, precious life, and to the wife he had so profoundly betrayed. The road ahead would be fraught with challenges, from rebuilding trust to navigating legal complexities, but Alexander had finally glimpsed what truly mattered. And so the man who had lost $20 million and nearly his soul stood in a hospital room cradling a newborn, vowing silently that no wealth or ambition would ever again eclipse the sanctity of family. Thank you for staying until the end of this gripping tale, a story of deception, heartbreak, and ultimately, the redemption born of true remorse. Mistress mocked the pregnant wife. The millionaire lost $20 million the next morning, reveals how quickly a grand life can collapse under the weight of betrayal, and how one mistake can ripple into personal and professional catastrophes. Yet in the darkness, there's a flicker of hope embodied by Catherine's resilience and the arrival of baby Evelyn Rose. The moral is clear: life's true wealth isn't measured in stocks or fame, but in loyalty, integrity, and love. If you found this story compelling, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring more real-life drama and cautionary tales that remind us of the power of choices and the promise of redemption. Thanks for watching.